The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GALA webinar series. My name is Manuela Noske, and I'm the Communications Manager at GALA. GALA is a global nonprofit trade association that enables communication and business across languages and cultures. We're headquartered in Seattle, Washington, in the United States. And today we're going to have a presentation by Sandra Yonter from Redbubble, who will talk to us about how to prepare to expand your online business internationally. We'll kick this off in just a moment, but as always, I do need to go over our housekeeping items first. Everyone's lines are muted to cut down on any noise. If you experience any technical difficulties, let me know by using a chat box, and I will work with you to troubleshoot them. If you have a slow internet connection, your audio may be disrupted. If that happens, you can use the number listed on the GoToWebinar panel to call in using your phone. We are making a recording of this presentation, and you will be able to find it following the presentation on GALA's global website. All participants will receive a link by email. If you have any questions or comments, type them into your chat box. We will get to as many questions as we can with the time remaining after the presentation. Lastly, tomorrow is your last chance to register for the GALA 2020 conference in San Diego at early bird rates. Early bird registration closes tomorrow. If you're still thinking about attending, this is the time to act on that. All right, let me introduce our speaker next. Sandra is an experienced executive with about 25 years of experience in building and growing businesses internationally. She has successfully driven business development for both large and early stage organizations, mostly e-commerce, as well as building and managing local operations. Based in Berlin, she has lived in Singapore and Paris and worked as marketing and business leader across various industries, including publishing, dating, fashion, home decor, and online marketplace. She has in-depth knowledge of e-commerce and strong experience in intercultural communication and management in rapidly changing environments. And now, without any further ado, Sandra, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Manuela, and thank you for all of you who are joining us today. I'm going to start very shortly presenting Redbubble. So it was founded in 2006. Redbubble is a marketplace for independent artists. We connect 900,000 artists and designers across the world with millions of customers who are interested in acquiring, buying, and common designs on high-quality products, such as apparel, stationery, houseware, wall art, and so on. So into the topic. There were companies that, and you might be among those companies who were thinking at some point about selling to customers abroad, or you might have already started. That's true that the world is big. The US, for example, has a population of 327 million, and in the world it's 7.7 million. So if you are targeting the US, that leaves more than 95% of people outside of it. Asia is the most populous continent with 4.5 billion inhabitants, which means that they represent 60% of the world population. China and India together constitute about 36% of the world's population. So Europe is still there as well. It's the second biggest region, but you see how diverse the world is with a lot of opportunities. Once your business is already established and you're probably already thriving in your home country, it makes a lot of sense to start looking at potential expansion outside of your home. You're already understanding your existing market, you have a strong customer base, you understand the requirements, you know how to meet the needs effectively, then it really becomes possible to look for new customers outside of your home. But there are risks attached to expanding beyond home market. Here are some known failures. There are tons of them. Target, Walmart, Groupon, Vente Privée, or BP, withdrew from specific markets after recruiting and then having to lay off thousands of employees or liquidating stores and losing quite a lot of money. So we want to avoid that, right? There are some known reasons for failure. It can be a wrong purpose, like thinking about expanding beyond your market because actually the existing market doesn't deliver enough. There might be false assumptions, like guessing that there wouldn't be significant investment required. There could be underestimation of the operating costs. And I discovered that actually there were higher taxes or fees by targeting a new market and so on. So again, like you want to avoid that. So let's go through the approach of entering new markets. So for some companies, the most lucrative and effective approach for international expansion might be through organic growth. So it's the creation of entirely new production or sales entity in an entirely new market. There are generally three primary models for this type of growth. You could be selling products or services in that new market. You could be creating a production entity in the new market, or you could also be constructing a near self-sufficient entity in the new market. In Redbubble's case, we chose Europe and we chose organic growth. Why? Because we had an existing fulfillment capacity, we had similarity between the home country, which is Australia, and the targeted region, Europe. We had low legal and tax impact. So there were tons of reasons for going through the organic growth approach. There's another approach, which is inorganic growth. It arises from mergers or takeovers rather than an increase in the company's own business activity. It is usually considered as faster for a company to grow compared to organic growth. If a company merges with another in pursuit of inorganic growth, that company's market share and assets become larger quickly. But mergers are challenging from an integration perspective. Acquisitions can generate quick growth, but the implementation of the technology, or the knowledge, or even the resources can be complicated or take time. So in other words, pulling value out of mergers and acquisitions is a bit more complex than just taking credits for sales. Let's go through a step-by-step expansion guide that is going to help really tackle topic by topic and make sure that nothing is left aside. So the first step is really to assess the company situation before you even decide to make the leap overseas. So you would have to evaluate if you have the funds you will need to support the initial investment and sustain the growth you're forecasting. There are questions like, is your infrastructure properly structured? Is that strong enough? Are you sure that your current customers will stay with you while you are diverting your attention to new markets? Is also your distribution stable? Will they continue to devote the same time and attention to your products while you're focusing on a new region? Then I will really specifically spend some time going through the in-depth market research because I deeply believe that this is core to successfully expand internationally. And I will be sharing with you 4 matrices towards the end of this webinar. So as an introduction, you have to look when conducting an in-depth market research, you will have to look at some criteria like the market size, the political environment, the competitive landscape, the distribution landscape, consumer specifics, the business environment, and the industry relevant data. There's tons of sources that you can rely on for gathering all of that knowledge. Government statistics are a very reliable source that is very accessible and most of the time for free. You have industry associations, trade publications, investor relations sections of companies' websites, and market research reports like Euromonitor, and of course, GALA is a very reliable source for having access to a lot of material as well. I won't surprise, and I will focus on the European region here very quickly. And I won't surprise you by telling you how needlessly complicated the European region is. The European market is very complex and fragmented. There are different languages. People are used to more than one language. There's free movement, which means young workers migrate to the north. There are 25 currencies used in 50 countries. Popular payment methods in Europe are, for example, Ideal, that you might not have heard about. It's an e-commerce payment solution used in the Netherlands, focused on online banking. You have Klarna, again, you might not have heard about them. It's an online payment provider targeted primarily at merchants in Germany. You have heard about GDPR, which on top, it's the icing on the cake for data protection that was introduced in 2018 for copyright. And there are other insights for the European region. Internet penetration has been slower, and e-commerce is catching up quite fast. Some specificities like in-store shopping is still easier in Europe. You can walk through the store easily since cities are more densely populated. North Europe is really into eco-friendly products, and now living in Berlin, I can tell you this is a thing. They want sustainable 100% cotton. They are environment focused. Nationalism also is growing. You've heard about Brexit. There has been political discussions around Catalonia, and the identity is a bit weakened. And Europe is not so consumerist. You're still like Valentine's Day and Halloween, or like the Santa on the Coca-Cola truck somehow. And we've noticed that Black Friday is really picking up, but it took time. And on top of that, country by country approach is really a thing, and we love personalization. Another focus, China. China is a complex country. Internet content provider licenses from the Chinese government are required for all domains. It's difficult to obtain. China's Great Firewall causes sites on foreign servers to load slow, impacting conversion rates, search engine ranking. There's no advertising on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Google, and all of the search engines and social media. And marketplaces, mobile and social commerce really dominate versus standalone websites that we are more used to in Western countries. So as I was saying, I will be spending some time sharing with you some matrices that will help segment and assess the markets that you're thinking about targeting. There will be 4 different methods. 2 of them will focus on prioritizing the markets that have the highest potential for you in your industry based on the products and the services that you're offering. And 2 will attempt to identify the potential revenue that you could get out of that. Then you will have to develop a plan. When you decide to push into overseas markets, you need to have a clear and detailed plan that should integrate the expected timing, the required resources. Do you have them internally? Do you want to expand? Do you want to recruit external vendors who have that extra knowledge and capacity or network? What about the communication? How are you going to approach this brand new project of expanding internationally? And how are you going to introduce that to the market as well? And then you have to come up with a detailed execution plan. In terms of production, the questions that you need to ask, like how much are you going to localize your products and services? Are you willing to do that? Do you have the capacity to do that? Have you reviewed your manufacturing costs in those new markets? Do you plan to open a new facility, or do you plan on increasing the existing production? Do you expect maybe lower operating costs because of the markets that you are going to target? All of those questions are really important. An example from Redbubble. This is how we've approached localizing our products, because we really wanted to lower the cost and lower the time for delivering our customers. And initially they were delivered out of the US, Australia, which were our core historic markets. And in 2018, we could localize as many products in Europe as in the UK, while we started targeting the European region. And this is how it impacted the time for receiving the products, and truly the customers received the products much sooner, and we could see the impact in our NPS score, Net Promoter Score, which I'm sure you're familiar with, in all of the markets that we where we improved our fulfillment capacity. Legal requirements is also, unfortunately, a step that you can't miss. There are a number of legal issues that you need to be aware of when going international. Running an international business in foreign countries means that you have to comply with all of the relevant domestic laws. If your business is about to prosper, the best advice in such a situation is definitely to consult trustworthy local legal counsel. But it is worth in advance to have an idea of what to expect. So for example, company laws, registered structure like branch or subsidiary have an impact. You can have different types of business climates, procedures, bureaucracy. Again, opening an office in 2016 in Berlin, where I discovered how bureaucratic the country was, and the impact that it had on the resources that we needed to have in order to support all of the paperwork that needed it to be delivered. Employment laws, wage, health, safety are totally different depending on the countries. Investment treaties between countries, whether it's bilateral, multilateral agreements. Legal systems, you're familiar with the common law in the UK and the US, and in Europe it's more civil law. Tax laws, you will need to be compliant. Intellectual properties, in terms of trademarks and patents, you definitely need to make sure that you're clear in those areas in the markets that you will be targeting. And I'm not even talking about corruption, unfortunately, in some countries. Operating models is also something that is interesting. You will have a choice. You will need to decide the level of local autonomy that you will allow for the new entity. This framework helps executives map activities that require local versus central, like in the headquarters, decision-making, and define whether the execution of the activities should be central, local, or outsourced. So it gives a bit of idea where maybe like a local strategy and local execution can be allowed for things like local advertising or IT support, but maybe central strategy, identification, and central execution should happen for things like a corporate logo or top management recruitment. So that is a foundation, but you need, of course, to adapt it to your company's business, industry, and history. You will have to expand teams abroad, of course, and you will have to take into account cultural differences. And they can have a surprising impact on how workforces should be managed. They help diversity, but you need to have them in mind. Like different nations have their own compliance, employment laws, as we have covered previously. But also what workers expect from their roles depends greatly from place to place. And that can make recruitment and management of a workforce across multiple locations a bit challenging. For a successful global expansion, it is vital that these differences are identified and factored into recruitment and people management processes. At Redbubble, I can tell you that we really aspire to build an environment where everyone feels that they belong. So we are working hard to create an open-minded, open-hearted teams with diverse experiences, diverse identities, diverse perspectives and backgrounds, and of course, languages and culture. But you have to think about that, and you have to think about how to bridge the distance. You will have to think about the tools that you will be using. You will have to think about time difference and which language you will choose as the official across offices language. Yeah. What we did at Redbubble is that in 2016, we opened an office in Berlin, which was our third after Melbourne and San Francisco, which were our historic headquarters. We launched in 3 additional languages. We learned a lot. We built a team. We continued further localizing the user experience in terms of marketing activities. We worked a lot in scaling our processes, and now we are ready to further expand much broader. So I wish everyone can go through those steps. And now I'm really going to spend a bit of time on those matrices that I promised I would be sharing with you that will help assess and prioritize the markets. The first one is Pestle. So it's an adaptation from the pest analysis from BCG. It's a framework. It is used to analyze the micro-environmental factors that might have an impact on an organization's performance. So this tool is especially useful when you start a new business or you are entering a foreign market. So Pestle is an acronym that stands for political, economic, social, technological, and environment, and legal factors. But throughout the years, and depending on the industries, a lot of people have expanded the framework with factors that are very specific to their own business. So as you can see here, on top of that table with a lot of numbers in there, you can see that I kept, population, political, economic, social, traditional factors, but then I started adding additional ones that I felt made a lot of sense for Redbubble. So of course, competition or speed to market is one. I also added individualism, and I will talk about it. It comes from Gerd Hofstede cultural values, and because Redbubble really stands for showing your personality through the products that you are buying, wearing, and using for decorating your home, like that specific cultural value was really interesting to take into account that metric. You can add also ethical, ecological factors, like in a lot of different factors that really are specific to your market. So what is interesting here is to look at how you build it, and you can score. You see scores on top, and you see also the final way of calculating, which is in red on top of that slide. So the overall score that you will get relies on how much weight you add into a specific factor. So for example, if in your industry, the size of the population is very crucial, But at the same time, the legal weight is also a crucial factor. Then you have to increase the weight to a higher level than other, maybe like technology or the proficiency in one language or another. So you will have really to adjust the matrix according to your business, and then you will have to come up with that final score, and then that will help rank all of those markets according to each other, and that will help you prioritize the markets that you want to enter first. So here you see I had a higher weight for criteria like, of course, the size of the population, but also the economic situation of that market, like how is e-commerce doing in those markets. They had strong scores, and for us, legal didn't really have an impact, so the score was 0, which means that at the end, markets like Germany, France, and Spain ranked the highest. So that doesn't surprise you when I tell you that actually we decided to enter those 3 markets first when we entered Europe. Now let's move to, just short focus on Hofstede. I was telling you about Gerd Hofstede. So he's a psychologist. He used 6 dimensions on national cultural values. So I talked to you about individualism, which is the one that we use, which you see at the bottom right of that slide. But there are in total 6 dimensions that he has been studying. They are available across 72 countries, and I'm really encouraging you, depending on your industry, to have a look at them, and they really help as well, facilitating the collaboration between teams in different regions, different offices, or with different cultures as well. It's not only when you're expanding products and services in a new market, but it's also facilitating the collaboration between different cultures in an office. So the next metric that I'm going to share with you is the assessment of the total addressable market. So here, the approach outlines the most promising markets based on the size, but also the breadth of those markets. So the data that you will have to collect is your e-commerce segment value, meaning how much your segment is worth, and also how much growth are you forecasting over the next 3 to 5 years, which is the projected value of this segment. So you will have to measure how much you own each product or service category when you access the data in your industry, and apply a percentage to the market value of that category. So let me give you an example. If you sell fashion accessories like scarves and gloves, you probably own around 20% of the clothing accessories market. And if you have access to the market data around the value of the clothing accessories market, this is how you would gather the size of your own category. So this will provide you with your addressable market. And then the exercise consists in combining the average revenue per user, so ARPU, by market, and the growth of the segment to focus the efforts on those markets with highest potential. So again, in red, bottom left, you have the way of calculating the average revenue per user, which is definitely the result of dividing the addressable market value by the number of internet users in your market. And again, you will come up with a graph that will combine both on the axis the size and then the growth, and then together combined. Obviously, you would like to focus on the markets that will appear on top right of that graph, and those should be the markets that you should be focusing on. Now I am going to share with you another approach in identifying the potential revenue that you could get out of that expansion. So you can value the revenue you already generate in your core market. You can divide the revenue that you generate by the number of digital buyers in your market. And then what you can do, and what I'm definitely encouraging you to do, is that you can track back and see how you have improved your market share over the years by capturing the evolution of the revenue by digital buyers over the years. You can do, there are other ways you can think about, I could track the revenue by internet users, for example. Fair. But the revenue by digital buyer is probably going to be much more accurate. That's true that that specific metric is going to be quite difficult to access. And the different sources that measure it are not always comparable with each other. So because it's governmental organizations, sometimes private, the way they are collecting that data might not be comparable. But it is a very useful exercise, specifically if you're always using that same resource and you're tracking back how it went and the growth that you got. Then what you can do is then you can apply the growth of revenue by digital buyers over a period of 3 to 5 years from a value which is likely to be close to 0 right now, right? So you see that graph at the bottom left, where in red is what you have seen in your home country in the first years, and then you can apply it to the countries that you are targeting. And then that helps identifying the revenue that you would be projecting in those countries based on the number of digital buyers that there are in those countries that you're targeting. So very helpful way of assessing the potential revenue that you could get. And the last one, very familiar, I'm sure everyone is very familiar with that, it's just leveraging on the unsigned metrics that you have. So currently you have conversion rate, an average order value in your core market, and that you get throughout the year, and you could apply a conversion rate increase post localization in the markets that you will be targeting, which is probably going to be close to the performance you're already seeing in your core market. And then you can see how much traffic you already have in your current market. And then based on the size of the population and the number of digital users in the targeted market, you can guess the traffic that you could get in those markets. And then overall, if you apply the forecasted traffic with the increase in conversion rate, then you have an overall forecasted revenue that takes into account that probably the average order value is not going to move at all from where it is. Usually localization doesn't really impact the AOV. So that's it. I hope you have a lot of questions for me now. I hope this was insightful. I hope this is answering some of the questions that you have while thinking about further expanding in your markets. I'm adding here how you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, reaching out to me on Medium as well. I'm writing some articles on that topic that go a little bit deeper into the methods, specifically regarding the matrices. So I'm encouraging you to reach out to me in consulting that material.
All right, thank you so much, Sandra, for sharing this with our audience today. to the audience, if you have questions, do please type them into your chat box. But let's start with this one here. Those matrices are truly awesome, but how do I get the market data that is needed to fill them in?
That's a very good question. So there's a lot of sources. I would highly encourage you to start using free stuff. You could use sources like Study Stuff, for example, that is very reliable, that has tons of data, but quite expensive. You might not want to invest unless you want to target so many countries at the same time. So there are a lot of resources like government statistics, for example. Again, like as I was saying, industry associations, there are tons in your specific industry, and I'm sure you can reach out to them. You're probably already a member. They probably send you newsletters. There are also local e-commerce associations. I'm thinking, for example, in France, you would have FEVAD, F-E-V-A-D, and you have the equivalent in every single country. Sometimes you need to subscribe. Sometimes they have free stuff. Sometimes they publish press releases when you can grab most of the information as well. There's, the investor relations sections of companies' websites are immensely helpful. I'm really encouraging you to look at your competitors in those markets as well, because they have already done that work and they have collected data for you. And I mentioned also earlier Euromonitor, that is another market research support, and there are tons of tools like that. So yeah, a lot of material out there. Again, like I'm happy to provide an exhaustive list should you be interested.
Cool, thank you. So following up on that, again, matrices are great, but it seems somewhat tedious for a first approach, right? Into adding another market. So how do I start? Let's say I don't have that data. How do I start?
Yeah, you can also follow your gut. Mm-hmm. You already know your industry. I'm sure you're following your competitors. You meet a lot of people that have tried, have knowledge. So it's very often like your first gut tells you that it makes a lot of sense to approach those markets. But then I would highly encourage to start somewhere with at least bare minimum of data to be collected in order to ensure that this is indeed the right approach. I've heard many times in the companies who had in mind a huge volume, a huge uplift, that they were putting so much effort. And then eventually when we did that exercise of collecting some data, they realized that actually the incremental revenue would probably not cover the investment. So it's really safe to do a bit of analysis. I'm not saying that you should do all of what we've talked earlier today, but at least, the Pestle matrix from BCG is a very safe way to start.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I'm curious about Gert Hofstede and the dimensions. Mm-hmm. Why did you decide, so he's got 6 different dimensions, why did you decide to only take the individualism dimension into account and not, let's say, power distance?
It's interesting. Yeah. Redbubble is really about self-expression.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we were considering, I will give you the example, we were considering the Asian region, and we are still considering the Asian region. We were also considering Portugal, and Portugal is also for Brazil. But actually, when you look at the individualism criteria or factor, you realize that it's so low in those markets, because the opposite of individualism is collectivism. Mm-hmm. And this is much more ingrained into the culture, the local culture. So positioning the brand the way it is currently, like Redbubble, you know, the current positioning is really about supporting self-expression, both for the artists who come up with the designs, but also for the customers who are purchasing those products, wouldn't be that meaningful. So we knew it would have a huge impact, and they would have been two choices. Either we could have said, we want to enter this market, but then, and I'm not saying that we will not, but then knowing that is really crucial for us to question the positioning in those markets.
So a different company may well have made a different decision on this depending on the product that they're trying to offer. Yeah.
Of course.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know. Great.
Yeah, that's why every time I'm really saying you should adjust all of the, you know, all of the questions in the step-by-step guide, all of the criteria and the factors and the weight that you're putting in every single metric. They have to be yours. They have to be so much adjusted to your business. You can't just copy and paste, and that's why no one else will do it better than yourself.
Yeah. How long did it take you to build these matrices into something that was truly meaningful? I mean, what's the time investment?
I think I spent probably the first 3 months, or even 6 months, talking to the teams, understanding the platform, the technical requirements and constraints, the current processes, the appetite for going international, at the same time as collecting the data for creating the Pestle metrics. I started there. So I would say it probably takes a couple of weeks full time, probably 4 weeks full time, depending, of course, if you're just targeting 3 countries or if you want an exhaustive comparison of the whole European region. But in my case, I really wanted to go broad and cover all of the European countries. It takes probably 4 weeks full time to make sure that you have a solid outcome and a solid conclusion that you can share with the board, the leads of the company, for them to make a decision that it is based on a solid prior research.
Yeah. Do you have stakeholders in the various markets that you want to go into that you can validate, you know, the matrices and the insights that come from it with?
Good question. Yes. I'm happy to hear that a lot of companies have used very similar approaches, and I'm learning from them as well. We challenge each other, we compare, and also I've been challenging even myself with those matrices that I have been that I have evolved with the time, and I check, you know, I go backwards and I check the approach based on the results that we had in this industry, in that industry. And we talk a lot at conferences and with network of peers. I really encourage all of you hearing here and attending that webinar to use your network and discuss and challenge yourself and question the metrics and the sources. So yes, I do that all the time. You can't just do that behind your laptop and come up with recommendations without questioning the approach. And internally, honestly, it's internally and externally as well. Like, talk to your finance guys. They have a lot of knowledge. Talk to your commercial team. Talk to your marketing team. They have such a great knowledge of competition, for example, and speed to market. Talk internally and talk to your peers as well, externally. Yes.
Would you use a different approach if you went into a true emerging market? And you know, so let's say maybe South Africa, because that is, you know, it's a stable economy. Would you recommend the same approach, or would you do something differently?
I have to admit that I have no experience at all in that region as a whole. But I would reply that I don't see why the approach, at least the basic, would be different.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, the criteria, the weight you would put in some of those factors would be completely different.
Mm-hmm.
But then the approach, the methodological approach should be the same.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sandra. This has been really insightful. I appreciate you taking the time and taking us through your experience and sharing this. This has been great learning for all of us. And another thank you to our audience for listening in today, for joining us, and for asking questions. Of the audience, I would love to ask to give us your feedback on the session today using the post-event survey that's going to pop up as soon as I close this webinar. It is short. It really is very short. But as always, your perspectives help us to continue to refine our webinar program. And with that, Sandra, I wish you a good evening in Berlin, and I wish everybody else a good and productive day if you're working in my time zone. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.